What if there was a way, a guideline that you could follow to make sure that you are always setting your dog up for an expectation, a criteria that she could actually handle? Keep watching, because today I am sharing with you a 4-part guideline to help you stay on track to always give your dog the right criteria for training when he's ready. Hey friends, it's Jenna with Dog Liaison Training, and I help you better enhance your dog's mental health. And on this channel, we like to do evidence-based approach, which means that all of the techniques I give you are founded in research and it's science, and we like to get nerdy on this channel. So if you are like me and you like to do a more nerdy approach to dog training, consider subscribing. And hey, if you have any questions for me, make sure you comment in the section below. Today we are covering a simple approach that you can implement now in order to make sure that you are always setting your dog up for a criteria that she is ready for. We want to make sure that we're always setting up dogs for success, but sometimes that's difficult because we go in thinking that our dog can achieve something only then to find out that she wasn't ready for that. This is a guideline that you can follow, a way to organize your criteria to make sure that you are always implementing steps when your dog is actually ready for them and not just randomly guessing. And we're getting started right now. Now today we are covering the 4D approach. Now there was a 3Ds approach that already exists. It's been around for over a decade, and I'm certainly not the first one to claim to it. But the 4th D is something that I personally implemented as a result of my practical experience with dogs. I found that this 4th D was just as important, if not more important, than the other 3. And that's why I created the 4Ds approach. Now, the 4Ds are distance, duration, distraction, distress. And that 4th D, that distress, is going to be something we cover pretty well because I want to make sure that you're getting a really good understanding of why I implemented it. And that's going to come up at the end of the video, so keep watching. The first D is duration. So how long is your dog going to be doing the given behavior? And for right now, let's just go with stay. I do have a full video on what not to do with stay, and you can check that out here. I'm also going to link it at the end of the video. But for the sake of today, we're just going to use stay as an example, but this can be applied and should be applied to every single behavior a dog learns. Duration is how long the dog is going to be in the stay, and how many seconds does he have to wait until you give that release cue or the yes marker specifically. And if you don't know what I mean by the yes marker, you can check out this video. I'll also link that in the description below. You can check that out. But we want to make sure that we're giving them a cue and indicator that the behavior is over. So you want to think of the duration element as the time between when the dog performs the given cue and the time that you say your marker word like yes. Usually this is in terms of seconds. Sometimes with certain given behaviors it can graduate to something like minutes, but for the most part you're looking at just a matter of seconds, which is one of the reasons when you first start off this, you want to count literally to like 3 seconds in your head. If your dog can't even do a given behavior for 3 seconds, there's certainly no reason to ask for 12, 15, 48 seconds. Down. Yes. Now be careful, because as you saw in this video, I was standing right next to Max the entire time. So this testing duration was not testing distance or distraction or distress. I was simply focused on duration. So it is important that if you're focusing on extending the criteria of 1D, that you subside or eliminate altogether all of the other Ds as much as possible. So once your dog has done 3 seconds sufficiently, then it would be time to do 5 seconds, then it would be time to do 12 seconds, then it would be time to do 38 seconds, whatever it may be. And as soon as you get to your predetermined time limit, that's when you want to immediately say yes. You do not want to wait just to see how long they can go. That's not fair. You want to make sure that you're saying that yes cue the second that they handle the duration that you've given them. Now, tidbit. Some people would shoot for 30 seconds and then as soon as the dog fails, put the dog right back in the sit and try to go for 30 more seconds. If you've set up a time limit that then your dog fails at, you want to pick right back up where the dog was last successful. So let's say you've done 25 seconds and you're ready to go to 45 seconds, but at 38 seconds, your dog gets up and moves. That means that 37 seconds is where your dog is successful, which means the next time you do your stay or your bed or your whatever, you need to only make the time limit 37 seconds. The next D is distance, and this is how far away you are from your dog when you give the behavior. Now, this could be like in the case of stay where you are putting them in a position and then walking away, or this could be that they are already out of distance and you want to be able to perform a cue. It just depends on how you exercise it. But most people are going to give cues on top of their dog and then back away. So you want to think in terms of steps. Your first objective is I just want to hit 1 step, I just want to hit 3 steps, I just want to hit 12 steps, and so forth. And very similar to the time limit, if you go for a 15-step criteria and on the 12th step your dog starts moving, that means 11 steps is where your dog's successful, and that means that your next repetition, the next time you practice it, you need to only aim for 11 seconds. Okay. So now you have duration pretty solid on its own. You have distance pretty solid all on its own. Now you're ready to practice distraction. And distraction, in my opinion, is the most fun to kind of get ridiculous with. And very similar to the crazy ant that comes over and is pretty excessive that I was talking about in my no jumping behavior. That looks like this, how not to jump on your dog. In that video, I was describing the crazy ant that comes over and gets your dog all wild. Like that ant, I want you to emulate her in distractions. And it's important to remember that distractions are not distress. We're going to get to distress in a moment, but distractions are just meant to be things that your dog does not find scary, concerning, alarming. These are just meant to be things that make your dog go, whoa. And like the distance and the duration, you do want to make sure that your distractions are predetermined. So you go in knowing exactly which behaviors you are going to do. And the second that you achieve that behavior, you immediately ask for a yes and a treat. Yes. Who's a good boy? Who's a good boy? Yes. Now the last D, which is probably the most important in my opinion, is distress. And this is something that I think a lot of times people get confused with distractions. Distress and distractions are not the same thing. Distress is consumed by fear, it's consumed by concern, it's consumed by some sort of very strong visceral emotion, whereas distraction is just something that's going to get your dog to go, whoa, what was that? The distress criteria is when the dog is most likely to say no. That's when they're most likely to say, I cannot fulfill this criteria. We want to make sure that we are always being very careful about our dog's emotions, being very mindful about what our dog is experiencing when we're asking them to be still. It's important to remember that distress is unique to every dog. There's no way that I can tell you in this video what stressors your dog is going to experience. But I would recommend that you really take time and assess your dog's own individual fears, concern, anxiety-ridden situations, and be careful when you're practicing these new behaviors in those situations because you want to be fair. If you are practicing a stay at the expense of your dog's flight response, that's not fair. But if you are practicing going to the bed as an alternative to bombarding the door when a guest comes over and you know that your dog becomes very stressed when guests come over, having them practice a place might be a good solution if they're adequately prepared. And again, you want to think about keeping this D's separate. So if you're practicing distress, you're really being very, very, very lenient on the other threes, the other distractions, the duration, the distance. You're being very lenient on those three other categories and feeding very readily and fairly. But we do want to make sure that if your dog has been practicing a stay, for example, in the other threes with distance, with distraction, with duration, and simultaneously has been using other methods to handle his stress and reactivity to other dogs, like counter conditioning and desensitization processes, if that's been happening and you are progressing reasonably with your dog in that context, then maybe it might be a good idea to practice stay in a more stressful situation with management, because this will really be a good indication to you on how solid that stay is. And it also is an indication to you how reactive your dog still is to other stimuli, because a dog that is highly reactive is not going to be able to sufficiently stay, at least not without horrible threat. Okay, so in a moment we are going to talk about how we put some of the D's together. We're getting to that. But for right now, let's say you're practicing duration and you're really not focusing on any of the other three. You just want to build some time. And while you are practicing, your goal is to reach 45 seconds because you think your dog can handle it. But at 28 seconds, some other distraction happens, whether that's, the kids come downstairs or there's a knock at the door while you're practicing this. There's some sort of accidental surprise, distraction, or distress. Immediately release your dog. Immediately yes retreat, especially if they stayed and maintained that position, because what you've just done inadvertently, it was an accident, but what you've just done is raised the criteria. And if now you still have in your mind that I want to reach that 45 seconds, now you're not just trying to reach 45 seconds, but you're trying to reach 45 seconds with distraction. And that's much more challenging. So we need to make sure that we are aware when the criteria accidentally goes up and we're accommodating that. Now, it is true that we want to make sure that your dog is not being reinforced before you say yes or before you acknowledge that the behavior is over. If the distraction walks in and your dog moves, nothing bad happens. Like, you just kind of get your dog's attention and try to reset when the opportunity comes back. But don't feed, because if you feed, then you're also just treating your dog for getting up, and that can get very messy. So nothing bad happens, but the treats and the reinforcers are reserved for when the dog has done an ideal behavior. Okay, so now we are ready to start putting two D's together. Let's say we're doing distance and duration. We're not going to do distraction or distress right now. But let's say that you want to start building in time with being able to walk away from your dog. Very reasonable. What you want to do is do about half of whatever your best is in each of those categories. So let's say that your best duration is 45 seconds and your best distance is 20 feet. That means that this time that you put the two together, you're going to do about 23 seconds with about 10 feet of distance. So you're putting about half of the personal best of each category and combining them. And that's just a scale. But be very generous and, be very lenient. Don't have high expectations. If you go for that 23 seconds with 10 steps and your dog fails, this is your time to really identify what specifically your dog failed at. Was it the time or was it the distance? What part of this was struggling for your dog? And that's one of the reasons following this guideline is so helpful, because it gives you a bigger scale, a bigger idea of what you're supposed to be looking for. So it's easier for you to identify exactly what criteria has made your dog fall apart. Once you feel like you're able to put 2 of the D's together, then it would be time to add in 3. And this usually means that you're starting to practice outside your house. So whatever behavior you've been working on, now you're going to start proofing it and generalizing it outside in a more distracting environment. Again, be very careful with your criteria. If you know that the distraction criteria is pretty high, then you need to keep your distance and your duration criteria pretty low. Likewise, if you go into an environment and the distress criteria is more than you expected, then you need to be very, very, very generous in your criteria with the other 3. You need to be very willing to feed, willing to have low expectations, and handling your dog with whatever successes they are able to accomplish. So I hope this video helped you answer how to set up criteria for a dog, how to go into a training session knowing exactly what you can and cannot expect from your dog's performance. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit like. If you have any questions for me, ask them in the comments below. Consider following me on Instagram at dog_liaison. You can always slide into my DMs or comment on my videos with any questions you have for me. I can't wait to hear from you, and I'll see you guys next week.